And if you look at snakes, they're doing today pretty much what they did a few million years ago, whereas we're not. We're not even doing the same thing as we did 100 years ago.
This week in Workplace Thinking, our interview with James O'Loughlin discusses practical ways organisations can be more innovative, plus a better way to think about our new normal. And in the library, we discuss a book that's compelling but wrong, and how your brain constantly assesses your social safety in the workplace. But first, what's in the news? Joining me for the news today is NeuroCapability founder and CEO, Linda Ray. Welcome, Linda.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
And the first Workplace Thinking news item or two is about bullying. In Ireland in the last week, they've introduced a joint code of practice on bullying in the workplace. And they've drawn a distinction between bullying and harassment because legally they have different definitions, but in terms of culture and psychological safety, you're looking at probably the same outcomes. In the same time, in Australia, a proposed code that would force Google to pay for media content from which Google profits saw Google threaten to withdraw services from Australia altogether. But a poll this week suggests Australians see that threat as bullying, with 34% of Australians more likely to support the new code after hearing Google's threat. Linda, there seems to be widespread backlash against bullies, and we seem to be making a lot of progress in a lot of ways, but it still keeps happening. Why is that?
I think the Google one's really interesting because if you think about, none of us like to see people bullied. You know, generally, if you have any degree of empathy, you don't like to see people bullied, and it makes you feel like something's not fair. We're seeing this on a grand scale. So, you know, there's a whole bunch of people that feel like this is very unfair and are willing to accept a new code of practice, even if that means that they might lose the service, because when we feel like something's so unfair, we can react very strongly to that perception of something not being fair.
That's excellent. And speaking of bullies, probably the biggest bully for 2020 was COVID-19. And in pandemic-related news, we've got a fair range of different items. So the Australian Pandemic Support Payment, which we have JobKeeper here in Australia, that expires on 28th of March. So that's going to be a very big talking point, and considering whether we see some sort of loans plan for businesses. According to the ABS, unemployment in Australia has actually fallen to 6.6% in December, but it is still 1.5% higher than the previous December. And we are faring a lot better than some other countries too. In the United States, the pandemic has seen a spike in class action lawsuits against employers, mostly relating to wages and hours worked. I think a lot of people were expecting that to happen. Online meeting platform Zoom, which pretty much everyone's using these days, they're adding new features and functionality in an attempt to hold market share as people start returning to work. But I've got the last item is, especially for you, Linda, in education, the universities are finding their business model under a fair bit of pressure. So obviously relying too much on people, you know, the face-to-face tuition is starting to be a bit of a millstone around their neck. Linda, the impact of the pandemic on our workplaces, we've seen a dramatic shift in our economy, our society and the workplace. Is this the new normal?
I really react to the term new normal because I think that we need to be really careful in terms of what is the new normal. One of the things I think about this time, and we'll look back on this time, the smart businesses will look back on this time as, wow, didn't we actually put on our innovation mindset and see this as an opportunity to rethink everything that we're doing. So I think that the businesses that are going to really thrive, you know, post-pandemic, and even we've seen it during the pandemic, are those businesses that don't go, well, this is new normal. They go, well, what can we do differently here? This is an opportunity. How can we capitalize on it? And how can we do things that will help to future-proof us for the future? Because we know that there's new strains coming out of COVID, so that, you know, we might all end up in snap lockdown. You know, there's that level of uncertainty. So how do we continue to be able to pivot and be innovative?
Excellent. Very well, point well made. Well, that's a wrap on the news for this edition of Workplace Thinking. Thanks for joining us, Linda, and I hope you'll come back for a chat later to discuss this week's interview.
Love to. Thank you.
And I'm talking today with James O'Loughlin, an author, broadcaster, a lawyer, innovation consultant, and at one time a comedian. Welcome, James. And can you tell us a little bit about how you got into comedy in the first place? That's a bit of a bizarre background.
I was a corporate lawyer and didn't like it very much and felt unhappy. And so I thought, well, what can I do to cheer myself up? And I used to do a lot of things at university, reviews and whatever. And a friend took me to see a comedy night and I thought it was perfect. But I have to do it. I'm a bit of a control freak. You don't need anyone else. You can write it on your own. All you have to do to get a gig is ring up and put your name down. You don't get paid initially, but it's really easy to get access to the stage. And as soon as I did my first one, I was hooked.
Do you miss that at all?
Well, in my keynotes on innovation and when I MC conferences, I still do lots of comedy. And I do after dinner speaking, which is comedic sometimes and sometimes serious and sometimes a mixture. So I still use those skills and I'm still up on stage enough to not miss it.
Right. So we'll get to the broadcasting side in a minute, but just give us an idea of what you do mostly today. Like what sort of your job look like today?
So I do two things, and one of them is I work with organisations to help them become more innovative, and that might involve speaking at their annual conference. It might involve working with them, doing a keynote and then a workshop. But essentially what I want to, you might have noticed everyone always talks about how important innovation is, but lots of times no one's quite sure how to do it. And when I was the host of the New Inventors on ABC TV for 8 years, I spent 8 years studying how innovators do it. And the most important thing I learned was that it's not a talent, it's a skill. That is, it's not something you're born with, like being tall. It's something you can learn, like playing the piano. And I wrote a book after the New Inventors finished, Innovation is a State of Mind, and did lots of research. And now I just try and go in and say to people, these are some things you can do a little bit differently every day. I don't want to upset your whole apple cart, but if you think innovation is important, if you think that in 5 years you'll be doing things differently, which of course we will be, and getting from here to there is everyone's job, working out how to do things better. These are some things you can do every day that'll actually jolt you out of that kind of habitual way where we come to the same place and work in the same patterns. These are some things that'll jolt you out of that, enable you to see what you do with fresh eyes, think of new ideas, find the best ones and implement them. And I also help organisations create that sort of culture in their organisation. And when I'm not doing that, I write children's novels.
Quite an extensive list of skills you've got there. So in your book, Innovation is a State of Mind, you mentioned that innovation is the driving force behind, what was it? Innovation is the driving force that has driven human progress. Tell us a little bit about that. It is.
If you look at snakes, they're doing today pretty much what they did a few million years ago, whereas we're not even doing the same thing as we did 100 years ago, or to an extent, 10 years ago. If you look around wherever you are now, everything that isn't natural, like a plant, is a result of human innovation. This cup, some point someone said, I'm sick of drinking out of the stream with my hands, I'm going to find a receptacle. My glasses are a result of human innovation. This speaker, it's our point of difference as a species, and it's enabled us overall to live the safe and comfortable lives. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but many of us live safer and more comfortable lives than people have 100, 200, 300 years ago. And that's essentially because of innovation. It's a continual thing that's continually happening. I know it's tempting to think, wow, we're in 2021 and isn't everything amazing? But in a couple of years' time, a lot of what we think is cutting edge today will be obsolete. And that's exciting, but it's also a bit scary for organisations, because 100 or 200 years ago, you could say, yeah, I make shoes and I just do it how my dad or my mum taught me to, and I'm going to teach my kids how to do it. That'd be fine. Can't do that today. You always got to be thinking of new, better ways of doing things.
So what's the difference between, you spent, as you say, 8 years on the new inventors on the ABC. So first of all, why, that was like a reboot. There was an original inventors back in the 70s, I think it was. It's gone for a lot of years on TV. Why was it so popular? Apart from the inventor, obviously.
Yeah, that's right. I think because people are fascinated by people who look at the same world as they live in. And when they see a problem, other people see an opportunity. And so many times we'd have something on the new inventors and people say, wow, why didn't I think of that? Or sometimes they'd even say, I did think of that, but I didn't do anything about it. We're all fascinated by what's next. It's the great human adventure. What's 2030 going to look like? And innovations are inventions, and are incrementally how we get there. Each new innovation, whether it be big or small, whether it be in a business or a home thing, gets us a little bit closer to the future. And that's how it's always been. And I think people are fascinated by that and fascinated by the people who do it and their stories.
So innovation and invention, are they interchangeable, or do you see a difference between what constitutes an invention and what we call innovation?
Yeah, this is a good example. The iPhone is an invention. It was created, the first one was created from, there weren't smartphones and then there were. iPhone 2, iPhone 3, iPhone 4, iPhone 5, etc. are innovations. That is an incremental improvement on what is already there. And some people get intimidated by, I'm not like Leonardo da Vinci. You don't have to be. All you need to do is to look at what you're doing now in your business, find things that aren't perfect. That's all. Things that aren't perfect, and think, not how do I make that perfect, just how do I make it a little bit better? So if you've got a system in your business that you know isn't perfect, or if your marketing isn't perfect, you just need to think, okay, if that system has 8 steps in it, how can I reduce it to 7? Reducing it to 2 would be great, but just go for 7, and that'll create a measurable improvement in your business. If your marketing is not very good, just how can I make it a little bit better? And a lot of times people don't embark on the journey of innovation because they think it involves them making things perfect, but it doesn't. It just involves them making things a little bit better than they are now, and we can all do that.
So how important do you see innovation being in the workplace, in organisations going forward?
Well, it's vital. It's how many businesses act in the same way as they did 15 years ago? I'd say none. How many businesses act in the same way as they did 10, even 5 years ago? Very few. Where every business is on a constant journey of innovation these days, maybe not 100 years ago, but these days they are. And most businesses recognise that, at least in their value statement. They have innovation in their value statement. What I help them do is actually make it a practical reality, so that it becomes part of everyone's job, not just to do their job, but to think about how they can do it better. And you get people thinking like that with, sticks and carrots, the 2 motivators of human behaviour. And then you create pathways for the ideas they have to be shared upwards, assessed, trialled, and find the best ones. You have to be comfortable with failure, of course, because no one only has good ideas. You only find the good ideas that are going to make a measurable improvement to your business if you're prepared to go through lots of ideas. But you don't get the good ideas unless you go through that step of thinking, that one had potential, but no, it's going to cost too much. That one, no. And then you get to the good one. So it does require a little bit of persistence, but it will be rewarded.
So with organisations today, they often say that they want innovation and they're about innovation, and they are requesting employees to provide innovation. But where are they going wrong? What are the big obstacles?
There's lots of obstacles, but they can all be overcome. One of the big ones is they stress motivation over method. That is, they say, come on, we can all be innovative and let's be innovative and we want to be innovative. But they don't actually set out a method by which to do it. And then they say to their people, by the way, you've got these 18 tasks that have to be completed by 5 p.m. So innovation is sort of a let's all do it, but maybe people aren't, it's not a KPI, people aren't individually accountable for their innovative output. And so, of course, they do the urgent things first. So the biggest obstacle is not enough time. And there's an easy solution to that. Just say 5 minutes a day, that's all. 5 minutes a day is when I look at what we do and think about how to do it better. And I don't leave work until I've done those 5 minutes today. And it's not extra. It doesn't mean my workday is 5 minutes longer because it's something management's told me to do. So they've got innovation in their value statement. I'm going to do it. There it is, 5 minutes a day. The second big barrier is a lack of confidence. People say, oh, I'm not like that Steve Jobs guy. And hardly anyone is. As I said earlier, most of innovation is small and incremental. I do workshops, and in it I tell everyone to identify an opportunity for innovation in their business. And then I give them 3 minutes to think of an idea to improve the way they do things. And I've run those workshops with thousands of people. At the end of 3 minutes, there's never been anyone who hasn't had an idea. If you back people into a corner and say you've got 3 minutes to think of an idea, everyone will have it. We don't lack ability. Some of us are out of practice. The third big barrier is what I call habitual thinking. That is getting so used to a way of doing things, you forget there might be a different way. You know that thing we say, why do you do things that way? Well, because that's the way we do things. So we've got to continually jolt ourselves out of that and come into work as if it's our first day and look at everything we do with fresh eyes regularly, almost like an audit, question everything that you do. So you might do 84 things every week, question each one of them and say, is it possible there might be a better way? And 80 times you might say, no, we're doing that as well as we can, but you'll definitely find some opportunities for innovation if you do that.
Is there any such thing as a bad idea?
Yeah, there's heaps of them. But I think we've got to reframe how we define and how we look at bad. So, I mean, we don't live in a Pollyanna world where you expect management to go, you have an idea and that's great and they're all great. I mean, most won't work. Most won't create a measurable improvement. I mean, that's the test. Will it create a measurable improvement to your business? But you only get the good ideas if you're prepared to go through lots of ideas. There has never been an innovator, as far as I know, who has had only good ideas. Everyone has bad ideas and they are a pathway to get to the good idea. What you do need to do is take the ego out of it, because what we are kind of hardwired to do is say, okay, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that innovation stuff. I had an idea and then it's an idea that doesn't work and you think, he was wrong. I am hopeless at this. You know, I can't do it. See, I tried and I failed. It's like, you know, is anyone good at playing the piano the first time they try? No, they persist. They're terrible. They're less terrible. They're less terrible. Eventually they can do it. So innovation is a practice skill. And if you do it, yes, you will have bad ideas, but eventually you will have a good idea that can improve your business.
In your book, you mentioned that you should thank people for their bad ideas. How much of innovation and getting innovation right is about developing a culture and putting people in an environment where they're encouraged to bring forward ideas, whether they're good or bad?
Great question. Yeah, it's very important and it's not that hard. So there are essentially two things you need to do. And firstly, make it clear it's part of everyone's job, right? Your job is to do this, 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 and this, and think of ways of doing things better. And it's not just a woolly, that'd be nice, it's a KPI, right? So you need to have one idea a month. That's what I always suggest organisations do. It doesn't have to be a good idea, it doesn't have to work, but it does have to be something. Once a month, you've got to walk into this office and spend a minute, that's all, pitching me an idea. This is something that isn't working properly. This is my idea. This is what I want to happen next to see if it's any good. That's all you've got to do. And then an organisation has to create some sort of system for using those ideas. And this is where lots of organisations fall down. They have, you heard of this, Innovative July. Let's all be innovative in July, which is okay. It kind of sends a message that the other 11 months you can do the same old stuff you normally do, but it's better than nothing. But they never think about the back end, and they get everyone to have good ideas in July. And at the end of July, they give all the ideas to Barry, and Barry has no resources and isn't set up to do anything, and he puts them in the bottom drawer and never gets back to anyone. And everyone who bought in just is really irritated. It's better not to do it than to do half of it. So you've got to create a bit of a system. And like I said, it's not that hard. You just got to work out the test. Okay, if 10 people are pitching you one idea a month, what's your test about what happens? You know, if it's got potential to make a measurable difference to our company, we'll give it some resources and some time to develop it. Or is it one of the best 2 that month? If so, we'll give it some resources. So then what resources, how long? 2 weeks, 3 hours, work on this. Then we reassess. Then if it gets through that stage, we keep it. So it's like a pipeline, sales pipeline, leads go in at the bottom, various stages, sales come out the top. It's like that, an innovation pipeline. Ideas go in the bottom, various stages to find the good ones. As you get further up, there's more rigorous stress testing of them, little trials, really doing cost-benefit analysis, and you find the good ones. Why I say you've got to thank people for bad ideas is because they've done good work. They've taken the time to do it. They've taken the effort to think of an idea, and that's half of it. It's practice. It's building the muscle. It's getting into the habit of doing it. So that one didn't work, but thanks. I want to hear your next one. It's not very hard to do, and that's much better than well, we asked you to have an idea and you had a bad idea. If you do, no one's ever going to go back after that, are they? It's like people think of new ideas like they think of babies. They're kind of proud of it, but they're worried about what will happen in the world. And so you've got to be a little bit gentle with people about that, how you treat them.
People are certainly proud of their ideas and they can become very invested in it. But you do say the aim is to fail quickly and fail cheaply. Is there a danger of an organisation investing too much and pushing too far to try and make something work that's just not going to work?
Well, you've got to be smart about it. We've all got scarce resources. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe using a sporting analogy, if you had 10 soccer players who are 14 and, you're a big club and you pick that one out, I reckon he's the golden child, we're going to develop him and da-da-da and da-da-da. And by 15, it's all changed. He's hurt his leg, he's lost interest, whatever. Much better to bring everyone along until you've got enough evidence and data to make data and evidence-driven decisions. So don't you think, I like the sound of that one. We've had that problem for a while and that's kind of cool. Okay, they're all on an equal footing now. I know we tried that idea a while ago and it didn't work, so maybe that's not going there. So we're just going to take them all to the next step. Then we'll have some evidence, we'll have some data, and we can say, look, the costs of this one are more than we thought and the benefits appear to be less. So that can go. And don't pick winners on hunches and instinct. It's great to have that soft, innovative mind, just making free associations and coming up with ideas. But then you've got to go into the hard cost-benefit analysis, analysis of them to find the best ones. And if you're going to fail, think about how can we get to the next stage as cheaply and quickly as possible. Can we do it in a week with 3 hours? Maybe then we'll know enough to know whether this idea still has potential or not.
The space that you're working in now is organisations that are pursuing a more innovative culture and more innovations within their business. What's the reception? How keen are people to pursue that? The leaders that we have in our organisations today, how big a priority are they placing on innovation?
I think everyone knows it's important. And there are very few organisations, leaders who you could talk to who say, no, innovation's not very important, we're cool. No one says that. So they all want to do it. The challenge is is on ingraining it as a part of what they do, and understanding that it's core business, not an extra thing that you do if you have time after you've finished all your work. Just getting that mindset that this is part of the work. This is something you should be doing every day. Every time you get frustrated, there's an opportunity for innovation. Every time a customer gets frustrated or a colleague gets frustrated, make a note of it. That means you can do things better. Every one of your systems and processes, maybe they're good, but maybe they could be a little bit better. Even when you interact with people, you know, if you run a meeting to give someone some feedback and they walk out irritated, that's actually an opportunity for you to take a step back and say, okay, how next time I do one of them, is there a way of doing it a bit better, doing it a bit more elegantly, getting the messages I need to get across, but bringing them with me? So that's innovation too, in the way we deal with organisations. So with people. So everyone understands it's important. It's just having the commitment to make it part of your everyday work.
I know there's somebody once, and you might have even quoted them, said that everything that can be invented has been invented, or there's nothing left to invent or something. Clearly that's been proven wrong. Is there, is this just going to go on forever? We've seen such big inventions in recent years. Is there any limit?
Well, I doubt it. You know, I mean, I think it's a part of what makes us human to be interested in how we can do things differently, how we can do things better. You know, when we live in a free market economy, there's always people looking for an edge, for a new business to fill a niche that might just be opening up. And yeah, I mean, unless there's some sort of cataclysmic world event, we're all back in caves. I don't see innovation ever stopping. It hasn't so far, ever since there were people.
With that in mind, then, are we going to see another reboot of The Inventors?
Well, that's a matter for the ABC. They own the format, and they've put it on twice, once in the 70s and once when I hosted it from 2004 to 2011. And I still get asked very often that question, but it's a matter for them.
How much did that change your life? Like, you've had a varied background leading up to that point already, but you seem to have found a niche that you seem to be in your happy place at the moment. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say so. Look, I was very fortunate to get that job. They auditioned a number of people, and I was very motivated, and not just because we'd bought a house the previous week and we had a large mortgage. I was motivated because I was really interested in it, but I didn't know much about the field when I got the job in 2000. I guess I got it in 2003. And from the day we started, I became fascinated, and I really wanted, you know, my eagerness to answer one particular question hasn't dimmed ever since then. And that question is, how do they look at the same world that we're looking at and see something different, see an opportunity? You know, how do, for example, when farmers are getting injured and even sometimes killed by cattle kicking gates, right? You know, they cattle kick gates and the gates go bang, and farmers are in the races and whatever, and the cattle yards, and even though they know they should never turn their back, that happens. And that problem's been around for hundreds of years. We had a guy called Ed Evans who solved that problem by putting a hinge in the middle of the gate. So when a cow kicks it, instead of it going bang like that, it just kind of falls in on itself. So, you know, hundreds, probably thousands of people would have looked at that and thought, that's a bad problem. Maybe they didn't even see it as a problem. Maybe they just saw it as the way the world is. But Ed was able to see it as an opportunity for innovation. And I'm really interested in how people do that. The processes, it is a set of steps. Look for opportunities for innovation. Where is something not perfect? Think about it. Have lots of ideas. See what you can do with each idea, just advance them slowly. Don't be terrified of failure. Let it happen, and then find the good idea and and implement it. A great tip for businesses is to stand in your customer's shoes. Think like a client or a customer and think about how you can make life easier for them. Be brave enough to ask your customers and clients, what can we do better? And they'll tell you. So there's always opportunities to look and learn and find better ways of doing things.
We're running out of time, so we do need to wrap up. And I don't want to put you on the spot.
Sounds like you got it.
Well, I'm just wondering, is there one problem that you would like to see solved? Is there something nagging in the back of your mind that we really need to fix for something?
Well, climate change, I think is the most important and pressing issue. And I think it's clear we do have the technology to do that. The barrier isn't that. The barrier is people's willingness to get on board and change habits and invest money in technology that's heading in the right direction. So I think that's the most important one at the moment. Coronavirus, obviously, but the vaccine's coming.
So if somebody could invent something that reverses the CO2 in the air, would be...
Well, it's a whole combination of things, isn't it? It's doing that. It's transitioning to renewables and having the right nudges and levers from governments to do that. It's probably an understanding from people that thinking a little bit more long term. But also the hinge point is going to come when renewables are cheaper, and if we put resources now into funding that technology and failing with some of the technology, but eventually find the technology that's going to do that, then you don't have to ask people to be noble. Do you want this new technology that's better for the planet, even though it costs you $100 more? It's much better way to create change is to make it smart for people to take up the new technology, make them want to do it.
That's probably a good place to end there. We're definitely looking into the future. Thank you so much for your time, James. And I might just ask you, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that? Do you have a website or a contact?
Yes, just Google my name, James O'Loughlin, and my website, www.jameso'loughlin.com will come up. So O'Loughlin's hard to spell, James O''Loghlin, but you'll have that up somewhere, Dave, presumably. So you can find me through that.
Good old Google. You can find just about anything in Google, can't you? As long as they stay in Australia.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for your time, James, and hopefully we'll be in touch in the future.
Lovely to talk to you, Dave. Thank you. Very good questions.
Welcome back, Linda. And before we get you to look at the discussion through a neuroscience lens, what did you think of James and his passion for innovation?
I'm a big fan of James O'Loughlin. I watched the show and loved it. So his enthusiasm and his passion just comes through. And I think that's what was really engaging, even when he was on the program, the New Inventors, and he was just so passionate about it. And so it's lovely. Yeah, I enjoyed it very much.
He's a performer, and I love that. When I asked him about comedy, he says he still gets to do comedy in his presentation and talks, and he's a very engaging speaker. He's great to listen to. But from a neuroscience point of view, what did you pick up when you were watching that interview? What sort of messages or key points did you pick up on?
Look, there was so many, Dave, and but I think one of the things he started off by saying is that we can all learn to be innovative, and I really agree with that. I think that innovation is something that we can not so much learn, but relearn, because I actually think we're born innovative. So think about when you were a baby. Now, one of the things that babies do is they learn to crawl and then they learn to walk. And I can remember watching my children, putting their hands on the table and then standing up. Now, children, if they weren't innovative from a really early age, they would fail at learning to walk, and they just go, well, that's a bit too hard, so I think I'll just be carried around and crawl around for the rest of my life. So we are born innovative. We are born to experiment and try new things. I think what happens over time is that we get these messages that tell us only certain people are creative and innovative, which is simply not the case. It's that we kind of lose that that curiosity and that willingness to try things and fail at them. So yeah, that was one of the things that initially struck me when he was talking about that. And so it's really kind of tapping back into your inner child, if you like, and being curious and being willing to experiment and to make mistakes and to fail.
It's interesting that you bring up that point, because he does talk about in his book, Innovation, A State of Mind, about children and play and how children invent games. And also one of my great heroes, Edward de Bono, one of the great creative thinkers, he goes down that same path about, inventing new games and new ways to play. So how do we get in touch with our inner child? Like he did talk a bit about ways that you can get adults in the workplace to actually engage more with innovation. What was your take on that?
I really liked how he talked about not trying to bite off really big, hairy, giant projects, really thinking about it becoming an everyday habit. And we know that the brain is an energy conserving organ. So we've got to be convinced that it's going to be worth our effort to invest the scarce resources, our energy, into trying new things. And I guess one of the things that he talked about that I really love, because I've seen this in lots of organisations, is they have a innovation day or an innovation month. And so what that tells to the brains of that organisation is, well, you only have to be innovative one day a month or for 1 month, instead of seeing it as something that is part of what we do every single day.
So that encouraging people to spend 5 minutes a day is one thing, but the bit that he probably caught me a little bit by surprise is when he talks about making innovation a KPI. And my initial thought was to have a bit of pushback on that, because is that something you can really have a KPI? But in terms of the workplace, there's a lot to be said for that accountability of saying this is your job.
Yeah, and I think that's what he was trying to say, is it should be part of everyone's job. And really, it is how we're born. So somewhere along the way, we unlearn how to do that. So it's really kind of bringing something back that is natural that we've done in the past. So, we do have some wiring in place about how to do that. But yeah, that it becomes something that's expected, not something out of the norm. And, KPIs, I prefer to look at it as a key focus intention. So one of my key focus intentions that I'll need to report on is how I've been paying attention to innovation, and whether something that you try works or doesn't work. It doesn't really matter. It's that you're actually trying it. And I've worked with organisations that have done this, and it's been quite extraordinary to see the difference. I think the key thing that I've seen in organisations is don't tell people how to do it. Let people work out how they're going to do it themselves, so that you don't kind of generate an autonomy threat in people. But yeah, I think we hear time and time again, come on, we need to be innovative, we need to be creative. Well, let's link it with some measures and some habits that we develop, because I think that's the other thing he talked a lot about, was how do we make this a habit so that we just engage in it without kind of going, oh, right, okay, it's innovation time. We actually just do it in a natural, spontaneous way.
It's funny about the habit. It's a habit I've been working on for quite a while. And it's amazing how many, once you get into a habit, it's amazing how many great ideas you can have. But it's also a little bit disappointing when you do a bit of Google research and find out that you're not the first one to have that great idea. But we did talk a little bit about bad ideas, and I'm probably a believer in that there's no such thing as a bad idea, because I think every bad idea is an opportunity to mold that into, it's a prompt to come up with a good one. But he does say that bad ideas do happen, but it's important to fail quickly and to fail cheaply, to call those out. What from a psychological context, what are the dangers with bad ideas?
Some of the dangers with bad ideas, if a person has a big investment in an idea, it's very hard to let go of that idea. So that fight to be right kind of kicks in, and we don't want to be seen as failing, really. None of us want to be seen by others as, in a poor light. So sometimes people can hang on and flog an idea for far too long. And so I guess what he was saying is, be strategic and actually think about how you allocate resources to that. And that fits with how the brain operates as well. If we give permission for people to, be able to challenge each other. And I guess you can only do this when there's high levels of psychological safety, where you can actually say, hey, Dave, I think we've really given this idea a go and I'm not sure it's going to pan out, and you're not going to be, you'll accept that, and you kind of go, yep, fair enough, and you move on. So it's when people work in quite silo-like manner as well. So they've come up with the idea in total isolation, so there's a lot invested in it, and then they share it, and not everyone's as enthusiastic as they are about the idea. So sometimes it's nice to, early on when you're coming up with an idea, share it with other people and test it out, and that will also give you an indication of whether it's worth investing your precious time and resources into exploring that idea further.
I'd like to take that exercise of 3 minutes to come up with an idea. I'd like to take that exercise one step further to prove my point that there's no such thing as a bad idea, by giving those ideas, swapping them, and telling the person who's received the idea to turn that into a good idea. Because I think when you're under a bit of pressure, that's where all the really good ideas seem to happen under the most pressure. And it's not necessarily so much the incentive, but having that goal. And I know Edward de Bono does talk too about getting rid of obstacles like boundaries so that you can be more creative. But he also talks about imposing boundaries, and you have to come up with something creative within a very strict, because that can also help creativity. So I'd love to give the worst idea you could possibly come up with and give it to somebody and say, how do you turn that into a good idea? Because I'm sure there's something there.
Well, I think that was in line with what he was talking about, that some people see problems, other people see opportunities. And I think that links with growth mindset or fixed mindset. So Carol Dweck's work, where when you have a growth mindset, you are more open to looking at new things, trying new things, and making mistakes. The other thing I want to, it kind of links with the bad idea, and this is what I see so much in organisations, is someone will say, well, maybe we should try this, and then you've got someone goes, oh, we've already tried that and it didn't work. Now, most people get a bit frustrated and upset when that person says that, like, oh, they're just, they're not on board. Instead of actually seeing that that's a really valuable memory and resource to tap into. So instead of going, well, let's just try it anyway, say, well, you've tried it before, so you've got a whole pile of knowledge about what didn't work. So we really want to hear what didn't work so we don't make the same mistakes again. Now, what that does from a brain perspective is it actually means that person feels some significance, and that there's people caring about what I think, rather than shutting them down, in which case then they shut down, they hunker down, they don't share this valuable knowledge, because it could be that they have seen something not work and you don't want to make that mistake again. But it might also be, well, what if we made sure that we took into account that and tried something a little bit new here? What do you think you could do now that you didn't try back then? So it engages people in that process as well.
So what I hear you saying is, if you can take into account how the brain works and what other people might be thinking, you can unlock all kinds of things.
Absolutely. You can unlock hidden creativity and that innovation. I think we don't do it enough. We don't spend time in reflection in organisations. I think that's a massive problem. We just go from one project to the next without actually going, what worked, what didn't work, and what can we do differently next time? 3 really simple, basic questions that can save your whole world of hurt into the future and pain.
So did you pick up any other nuggets or things to talk about in the process of that interview?
I think the big takeaway from that interview with James is about how you make this a habit. And we can have a great intention. You can listen to what James said. You can hear what we've been talking about and go, yeah, oh yeah, I want to build that as a habit. You actually have to have a habit implementation plan. So build a plan, you know, and actually put it in your diary. When are you going to do that 5 minutes of innovation? Have little, what we call nudges and cues that keep your attention focused on that. So, you know, it might be that you have a couple of reminders on Post-it notes or whatever to say, are you adopting an innovation mindset? So I think that's the key thing. He's really talking about it as a mindset. And so rather than let's just do what we've always done mindset, it's well, how can we try and do things differently? How can we make this a habit? That was the big takeaway for me, I think.
That's excellent. Well, thanks for that, Linda. I hope you'll join us for the next episode to provide those insights and the neuroscience perspective on a new topic. Thanks for joining us this week.
You're very welcome, Dave.
So we're in the library today and we're just having a look at what we're reading, and we've got a couple of interesting ones today. One might be what we might call a controversial topic, and one is the all-important research paper. So first of all, Linda, what have you been reading this week?
Probably actually for a little bit longer than a week, Dave. You know, I love to read books. And so when you said to me what books you've been reading, I said, well, I haven't been reading books, I've been reading research papers. And it kind of ties in with my topic for my PhD. And it kind of, how I got into this area, and I'm looking at a whole bunch of stuff related to social evaluative theory, SET. And it really came about from a conversation. Isn't it interesting how new theories and new models come about through conversations? There was a conversation with my PhD supervisor, Professor Justin Kennedy, and he proposed an idea to me that really, you know, the brain has two key states, fear on, fear off. And I sat with that, and there was a lot more to that conversation around constructed emotions and all that sort of thing. But I sat with that and I kind of went, that doesn't feel right. And so I went away and did some thinking and came back and thought, really, it's the brain is fundamentally, moment by moment, assessing and asking, kind of like making an assessment, am I safe or am I not safe? And that can be in the physical realm or in the social realm. And I shared that with my professor, and he thought it was pretty good. And so I started talking about a concept called social safety. So we've been talking a lot about psychological safety, but it seemed to me that there was something that happened before that point at which we feel psychologically safe. And this was our assessment of our social context, our interactions with another person that happens mostly outside of our conscious awareness of, is this a safe place to take risks, and do I have a positive self-image here? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we do that we link back to past memories and how we're feeling, you know, whether we're feeling anxious or we're feeling calm. So it relates back to our affect. And, you know, that in turns helps us to make predictions about whether I feel safe. So there's an assessment and then I feel safe. And I guess what, when I started to delve a bit, you know, as I need to do some more research in this area, I started coming across the concept of social evaluative theory, which hasn't really been linked with psychological safety, but I think it's one of the key factors, because it's kind of the process that turns on our kind of stress response. So you know, when we feel a social evaluative threat, then our stress response turns on because we're trying to keep ourselves socially safe. And again, that happens a lot outside of our conscious awareness. So that's where my head's been. I've been looking at research around and wading through papers that have been exploring that concept, mostly in relation to kind of anxiety disorders and stuff like that. But I think there's something valuable we can glean from that and take into the workplace. And you know, Dave, I love taking something and trying to get my head around it and understand it and then relate it to what we do and how that makes sense. So that's what I've been reading.
I think that's a fascinating topic. I'd be interested to see how much overlap there is, or how social safety and psychological safety feed into each other or interact or interplay. That
Yeah, look,
that will be fascinating.
I'm going to do a webinar about this. So I'm actually developing a model that I've got kind of crudely drawn that I'll share as it evolves. And I'm really looking forward to kind of sharing my thinking as it evolves around this topic. And so please make sure that if this is something of interest, then join me for the webinar, and I'll be talking more about it.
We'll definitely flag that down the track when we put together the list of webinars for the year. So I'd like to raise an interesting, controversial book with you. For those playing at home, Linda and I have had a bit of a discussion about this one offline, because I came across this book and this author, Carl Sagan, in doing the Neuroscience of Leadership course. There was a research paper that somewhere along the line cited Carl Sagan and the book Dragons of Eden, which I was at one of those phases where I see an interesting book, I'll buy it. So I have a flood of books coming into my home, and I started reading this, and I do find it fascinating. But the original paper would have been to do with the triune brain model. And perhaps, Linda, you might just elaborate on that a little bit about the model that we have worked on in the past and where we're at today, just to put it in a bit of context.
I think the triune brain model was developed before Carl Sagan made it popular in his book by Paul McLean. What's interesting is that it's been debunked by evolutionary neuroscientists like a long time ago, but it remains compelling for people. And we see triune brain model, that you have a mammalian, lizard brain in a lot of places. Even in research papers that I still come across, I see the reference to the triune brain model, and hearing neuroscientists still speak about it when compelling theory, but it's wrong. It's debunked by many evolutionary neuroscientists. You can also see a really good critique of the model by Lisa Feldman Barrett in her book. Yet, I guess it was something that was appealing because it seemed to make sense to us. But we need to understand that it's not the way in which the brain evolved. That there's a process to evolution that doesn't include you have some sort of brain and then all of a sudden you add other layers onto it. And yet there's a lot of people still talking about it. So I'm really pleased that you brought this book up, as a book to think about, because it has just made its way so much into the popular pop psychology. And I see even in psychology courses, they're still teaching this model, even though it's not right.
I think that when you say compelling but wrong is probably a great way of describing something that has been presented by Carl Sagan. And I don't want to disparage things that he's done in the past. He presented Cosmos, which is one of the most watched, I think it is the most watched program in the history of American public broadcasting. And it's been watched by 500 million people. So there's no slouch in that. And that was his key claim to fame, was astronomy. I believe he was the guy that designed the Pioneer plaque, which went up in the Pioneer spacecraft with pictures of or diagrams of humans and where we are in the planet, or where the spacecraft has come from. And also the, I think it was the Voyager Golden Record, which had recordings and pictures of Earth. So alien life forms, well, we'll see where we are.
Right, a very clever man who, and at any time where, you think this was in the 1970s, I think he wrote this book. At any time we want to understand how things work, and we use the knowledge that's available to us at the time. I guess what neuroscientists are saying is that we've learned more about the human brain probably in the last 10 years than in the whole of human history, because of advancements in technology and just understanding how things work. So it's, sometimes when I say to people, triune brain model, it's not right, they go, what do you mean? And they get really, because it's something that's made sense to them, and we have to find ways to help people better understand how the brain, did evolve, and that it's much more networked than we ever thought before. So, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's contested now, you know, even whether there is a limbic system, you know, and what parts, there's no agreement amongst neuroscientists around what parts make up the limbic system. So I think it's great to read stuff like this. And he was an incredibly clever man, using the knowledge he had at the time to share it with people in it. And he did a great job of it, because it's taken hold, this very compelling but wrong theory.
So anyway, it's been a fascinating. I don't want to use up a lot of time here. It was meant to be a quick look at what we're reading in the library, but it's good to get a controversial subject out there right at the start. It's been fascinating talking. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And that's all we've got time for in this edition of Workplace Thinking. In fact, we've gone a little longer than planned. So I hope you found something of value in this innovation, and we'd love to see you next time. Don't forget to like, comment, and share, and let us know what you'd like to see in future editions, because this is about bringing value to your workplace and to your workplace thinking.